Calamari, salutations everyone! Squid here, bringing you the return of the pick'ems. Finally, I caught up with the uploads so that I can finally do them. And the reason I decided to do them on a separate video this week is because my recap video was actually 2 weeks long. And because I want to go a little bit more in depth into each matchup that composes the round 1 of the playoffs. So that's why I decided to do the video separately. So without further ado, let's begin the matchups. And the first matchup that I'm gonna review is Cerulean City Mewtwo versus the Sydney 6. I remember specifically that this was the first match that I watched in the whole season. It was a really good, really high quality match, and the match was kind of defined by the Vaporeon being tricked by a brilliant Mew set that was designed to trap it and then just Toxic stall it. Will that work again? I'm not sure. I think Saidan will try to predict that and make a double on the Mew or something like that. And also not clicking flip turn directly on the Mew, just switching out first so that the Mew blocks someone else instead of the Vaporeon. So it probably won't come into play, and that means that the Vaporeon will actually be a nuisance for the Cerulean City Mewtwo to deal with. So how can they get around that Vaporeon? I think that Luke Harry has used some unconventional Dracovish sets before, and I think he could pull up a really unconventional set. Some ideas that come to mind are Subtoxic against the Vaporeon, because the Vaporeon has kind of a hard time breaking through substitutes from the Dracovish if it doesn't have Ice Beam, so Subtoxic is an option. Power Herb Meteor Beam might be crazy, but might be an option against a fully physically defensive Vaporeon, so something to consider. Also, Banded Dracovish going for Leech Lives or locking himself into Outrage might deal a good chunk to it, and eventually Super Fang might also be a good way to chip down the Vaporeon, although Super Fang will probably not 1v1 the Vaporeon by itself. So it's pretty difficult for the Dracovish to get rid of that Vaporeon, but I've noticed that Saidan tends to use its Vaporeon quite passive, so I think a taunt user by Luke Harry could prove a really good advantage in making that Vaporeon, if not outright dealing with it, just forcing it to switch out. That's probably a good way that Luke Harry has to get that Vaporeon out of the way and try to chip something else on the Sydney 6 team. Another good option that the Cerulean City Mewtwo have is Light Screen. If we look at Saidan's team, its more prominent threats tend to be more on the special side of the offensive spectrum, and that means that Light Screen will actually be highly valuable in a matchup where so many special attackers are present. Mew for the Cerulean City Mewtwo will be hugely important because the correct Mew set with the correct coverage, preferably a setup Mew in my opinion, will wreck Saidan's team. Probably not the Cosmic Power set because the Assault Vest Heatran might eat it for days, but something on the lines of Nasty Plot, Dragon Dance, that might prove quite effective against Saidan's team. I was mentioning Saidan's team, and they do have the matchup advantage here. The reason for that is Tapu Lele just to hit KOs anything on the enemy team. With the correct coverage, just Psychic, Psyshock, Shadow Ball potentially for the Mew, and Focus Blast for the Miltank, nothing wants to take those hits. Every time the Tapu Lele comes in on the field, it probably claims a KO. So that's the main reason why Saidan has such a big advantage. And I spoke of substitute sets of Dracovish, and if the Vaporeon actually has the Ice Beam coverage, which Saidan hasn't brought all season, mind you, it's enough to break Dracovish subs if it doesn't have any HP investment. Another good thing that Saidan can utilize is the Celebi. So Celebi is also really good, combined with Psychic Terrain from the Tapu Lele. These are two very good wall breakers and outright win conditions that Sidon can utilize and will probably utilize as he did in the first time these coaches matched up. Miltank might have proven a nuisance to deal with the first time around, but now that Sidon has the Hitmontop, that Miltank will sure be a lot easier to break through. Sidon has the matchup advantage. As for my pick'ems, I will pick the Cerulean City Mewtwo and Luke Harry. Main reason for that is consistency of performance during the regular season, and Luke has just been more consistent than Sidon. Sidon has been a bit hit or miss this season. I'm expecting him to potentially prove me wrong, but until proven otherwise, I will go with the more reliable coach, even if he has the matchup disadvantage. We're gonna move on now into the second battle. And the second battle is the Hellblaze Volcaronas versus the Nashville Nidokings. Looking at the Volcaronas side first, Dragapult looks quite scary, and I think if it sets up Dragon Dance at the right time, I think it will be downright unstoppable. So it's a really good win condition for the Hellblaze Volcaronas here. Double is kind of a check to Gengar, which is the fastest threat on the Nashville Nidokings side, unless Focus Miss hits. So if Focus Blast hits on a predicted double switch-in, that might ruin it, but otherwise double with max special defense might work quite nicely here. Quagsire is actually a really good wall in this match. It can run both Water Absorb or Unaware, and it would be justified. I would quite prefer Water Absorb to Unaware due to a reason that I will speak later down the analysis. And on the Hellblaze Volcaronas, there's still another offensive option in Galvantula. I think Galvantula also looks quite nice here, and this is basically the tools that the Hellblaze Volcaronas have available to them. Some spike setting could have been an option, but looking at the Nashville Nidokings side, they have the Xatu, and I think the Xatu will be a very important mon in this match. So the Xatu is doing two things here. It can stop the hazard stacking from the opponent, because the mons that want to set up hazards are quite predictable coming in, and Xatu can hit super effectively both of them and deal good chunks of damage to both of them. And also the Xatu can potentially run a Trick Room set that sets up the Copperaja to sweep late game. So that's another option that the Nashville Nidokings can explore, so watch out for that. Another thing that the Nashville Nidokings haven't utilized yet, but could potentially bring this match, is Dragon Dance Crawdont. So one Dragon Dance isn't enough to outspeed a Dragapult, but two Dragon Dances before the Dragapult hits the field is actually enough to outspeed the Dragapult if it's not max speed. And most of the time Dragapult is actually not running max speed because it's so fast it prefers to invest its EVs into HP. That's an option that Braves can explore. Given both of the teams and the matchup that we have here, I'd actually go with the Hellblaze Volcaronas. They have the matchup advantage. They also have been playing to a higher level than Braves, so that's my pick for this specific match. Moving on into the third match, now in the Armor Division, we will talk about the Philadelphia Melmetal versus the Trashtown Thieves. So we all remember the last game between these two coaches. It was a long drawn out match that ended up going to timer with a 1-1 victory for the Trashtown Thieves. That said, I don't think the Thieves will make the same mistake. So they have two main tools to deal with the Jellicent, which are the Boltund actually running an electrical move, and the other option is actually breaking through the enemy team with a Alolan Executor. Alolan Executor is actually a pretty good wall breaker against the Philadelphia Melmetal's team, and in general also that Leaf Storm and Draco Meteor stabs sure dent a hole in almost every team. The mon that resists them better is actually Ferrothorn, but Ferrothorn, I don't know if it's taking that much special attacks, and the Alolan Executor does have the fire coverage, so it wouldn't be my first option against the Alolan Eggy. And the thing is, the ice coverage on the Philadelphia Melmetal's team is actually quite lacking, so the Alolan Executor is actually a pretty good option for Bishmi here. And Sableye. Bishmi, please bring Sableye. Sableye has taunt and stops so much of what the opposing team wants to do. Please bring it. You picked it and haven't brought it once, I believe. So also Centiskorch. Centiskorch also has an amazing matchup in this match. So it has pretty good coverage for almost anything that the enemy wants to do. And that Fire Lash dropping defenses might prove quite handy. On the Melmetal's side, the Jellicent. So the Jellicent was the MVP the first time this coach faced, so I'll actually go ahead and say that he should bring it once again, because that Strength Sap on the Jellicent will do a number on anyone trying to set up with it or trying to attack it. There are few options on Bishmi's side that can actually deal with it, and another option is Jolteon. So if Bishmi does decide to not bring the Rhyperior, which I think is unlikely, sure, Jolteon might have a really good time, because other than Jolteon, there's still the Lantern question here, but the Shadow Ball should deal a pretty good chunk to the Lantern. And the thing is, Bishmi can't actually bring all of the mons that are useful to the match, so he'll have to make decisions. One of those decisions might not bringing the Lantern, and once the Rhyperior is out of the way, the Jolteon is just free to spam the electric type attacks, which two of the greatest walls of Bishmi in Corviknight and Mantine are weak to electrics, so the Jolteon might be a really good bring here. Webs is also an option, and because I mentioned that both the defoggers of Bishmi's team are weak to electric type attacks, bringing them might not be that out of one's mind, because the Charjabug can set up the webs and then threaten the defoggers on Bishmi's team with its electric type attacks. So that's also a pretty good option that the Philadelphia Melmetals have. Victini is the last point that I want to talk about. Victini has an insane coverage, insane. Its coverage may prove useful against Bishmi's team, because other than that, ice type coverage is hard to come by. Fire coverage hits a pretty good chunk of Bishmi's team. Actually, the Corviknight and the Darmanitan, but these are the two biggest threats that Bishmi has, and potentially some other coverage for the Centiskorch, something like that, should prove useful. That said, I think I'll still go with Bishmi, based off regular season performance. The matchup is pretty even, I'd say, on both sides, so regular season match performance matters a big time to me at this point of the league, and I think Bishmi performed better than Cherry, even though Cherry did have a pretty impressive last stretch of the season. I'm going with Bishmi because he performed better during the season, and I think he's capable of, with some tweaks on the team that he had before, he should be able to break through the fat of the Philadelphia's Melmetals. And now, actually, we go into the last match of this round of the playoffs. It's the Rustboro City Rejects versus the 3 Electrons. So let's look at the Rustboro City Rejects first. Acrobatics set on the Rillaboom works pretty nicely here. Vespiquen is the expected resist to the Grassy Glide, and if the Rillaboom has Acrobatics, it should basically render it useless. And a choice scarf set may also prove quite effective to outspeed most of the threats on the Electrons team, and so I think the Rillaboom will be the main offensive threat on Art's team. As for defensive walls, Moonduck. Cresselia looks really good here. There's not much that I would expect to be able to break through it. Main things are probably knockoff from the Landorus or Poniard, and Poniard might not actually be the biggest threats on the side of the 3 Electrons. Also, an expected Sucker Punch from the Cinderace can potentially be turned around, so there's also that. Watch out for that Cresselia because it may be quite annoying for the 3 Electrons to deal with. Also, Urshifu. I said that Rillaboom would be the biggest offensive threat on Art's team, and that's mainly because the Urshifu really doesn't look that great in this matchup. There's some pretty good things that resist the fighting type stab and some pretty good things that resist the water type stabs, so mainly Seismitoad with that water absorb can deal with the Urshifu quite nicely, I think, so there's something to consider there. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if the Urshifu didn't come to the match. Offensive Crobat actually looks better than the Urshifu here. Offensive Crobat is probably, on the eye test, is actually the fastest thing on the match, so it's quite hard to switch into by the 3 Electrons because of the coverage it gets. And yeah, those are the main offensive threats of the Art's team, the Crobat and the Rillaboom. Speaking about the 3 Electrons side now, if we look at Art's team, he only has one Defogger, and that is Crobat, and he has no grounded poison type. And that means that the 3 Electrons can actually utilize one of its most favorite strategies, stacking Toxic Spikes. So a Toxic Spike stacking looks really good here. And Arts cannot stop it quite effectively. First, because the Crobat has many ways it can be dealt with, mainly the Slowbro, which is probably the best check to it, but Slowbro can't check everything on the enemy team. Another good option that the 3 Electrons have is Pikachu. Sven has impressed us with its usage of Pikachu throughout the season, and with no grounded types, Pikachu sure looks quite nice here. The only resist to electric is actually the Rillaboom, and I don't think that Rillaboom wants to take the combination of Fake Out and Extreme Speed to the face, so despite that, electric type attacks sure look nice here. Even the Regidrago doesn't want to switch in on it directly because it will weaken the Dragon Maw attack that it has. Talking about checks to the enemy team, the combination of Delmise with the Seismitoad deal with pretty much all of the enemy team, and I'm looking at the Cinderace specifically because the Cinderace looks really nice here once both the Cofagrigas and the Cresselia have some chip on them, or they just get Toxic chip, which is a really good option. And Poniard. I joked a little bit about Poniard back there when I was referring to Arts' team, but Poniard is actually a pretty good bring here because it can deal with both the Cofagrigas and the Cresselia, which are gonna be the main walls on Arts' team. So the Poniard might actually be a good bring here. When I consider both teams, the matchup does look somewhat in favor of the 3 Electrons, and I'll pick them because of that, and because I've been really impressed with Sven. He's been one of those coaches that has been improving steadily throughout the season, and to me he's one of the 4 coaches that are really likely to bring the title home, so I'm going with Sven on this one. This will finish our episode of the Pick'ems for the first round of the playoffs. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to leave a like on the video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys on the power rankings for the end of the season. Thank you so much for watching. Squid, jetting out.